Welcome back everyone dito sa latest episode ng FYI and Voter Education and sometimes Agitation series. So to agitate things, kasama po natin today is of course our good friend and my amigo Cleve, and of course my former professor. I'm not sure how proud he's still of me after everything. Professor Ranjit, right?
Yes.
Very
proud, yeah.
Hopefully, by the end of
Should be the first topic.
the episode, yeah.
Can we make that a topic?
No. I want to make someone else a topic, and the someone else topic is that you recently released a survey just a few days ago, and in that survey, President BBM still saw a decline, but it looks like it's not as dramatic as some people think or some other surveys suggest. And at the same time, it looks like the sympathy factor for Sara is hitting a ceiling, if I can put it that way, or at least like the taper off. Is that a proper way of framing it? What is your understanding? Because numbers alone don't speak for themselves. But for the sake of our audience, can we talk about the numbers first? Maybe,
Okay,
Prof.
yeah.
Let's just go through the numbers and the graph first
Okay.
before we go into the vibe check, if I can put it that way. Yeah.
So, just as a context for our own viewers, Okta Research conducted a survey from April 2 to 5.
Right.
And of course, if you'll notice, it's a week after or 2 weeks after some of the latest surveys on trust and approval. Now, and this is part of a set of probes that will make up the first quarter survey of Okta Research. Okay. Now, what are the key findings? No? So, one is that except for VP Sara Duterte, every single top government official declined. The president, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President.
Even the chief of Supreme Court? That's my point.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah. Well, he's been on a downward trend for some time. But when we talk about officials, the only person that actually experienced some sort of surge, some sort of recovery, was our VP Sara Duterte, both in terms of trust and in terms of performance. So just to give you a sense, President Bongbong Marcos saw a...
which graph is this? Figure is this?
Okay, this is...
just for me to check on my data.
Just for the sake of our own videographer and okay, let's look at table 2A, and you guys will be able to see it on the screen, no? So you'll see that when we first took this, or when we last took this in the fourth quarter of 2024, you had a 65% trust rating for the president. And today, in the first quarter, or the end of the first quarter, we have a 60% trust rating. So that's a minus 5 percentage points. One could argue that's more than it's still significant, more than the margin of error, but it's not as significant as what we have seen in other surveys. Now, he's had double-digit declines in NCR across areas. The most nominal is in Visayas. The biggest is in NCR at minus 10 percentage points. And in terms of socioeconomic classes, you have a 11 percentage point drop in class ABC. It's kind of unique, no? The rich in our society, the most...
Well, they still love Duterte, it seems. They have been loving Duterte since 2016. I've been pointing this out.
I have to point out, as majority still trust the president in that class. It's just this was a big drop, no? What's unique is in class E, despite a uniform drop across regions and across classes, in class E, he had a plus 6 percentage rise. So while his decline in the nation, overall was a minus 5 percentage points. When you look at the granular data, he actually improved in terms of trust in Class E. So that's a unique thing.
Maybe we'll discuss. Maybe it has to do also with the... did this cover yung bigas distribution? The 20 peso bigas?
Kasama sa period. The timing, yeah. I think the timing of the service also, apparently caught... at the tail end of the distribution of so many of these, entitlements,
programs,
ayudas, as they call them. So I guess maybe that we captured that
exactly.
So that trend, or that change, But because overall he went down in trust, total is 5 percentage point drop. Right. Some would argue not as significant as seen in others, Now, on the flip side, you have the Vice President, Sara Duterte, who in November 2024 was at her lowest trust rating at 49%. Okay, that was her lowest. In the latest Q1,
Wait, can we start with her highest? Because she was close to 90% at
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Above, just to put things into context,
Yeah.
longitudinally.
Yeah.
She was above 80%
yeah, okay,
when she
that
started.
you would see that
Again, for people not to forget, you know, where we started.
In figure 1 and figure 2,
Yeah.
you'll see a trend analysis or trend line of her trust ratings over time, no? And it just like BBM, it's been going down, no? Her highest I think was 87%.
Seven, exactly.
And
Almost
then it's gone
90%,
down to
right.
49. The lowest was in
Wow.
November 2024.
Almost 50 points.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
like,
yeah. That's the fourth quarter
Oh,
of
wow.
2024. And it rebounded to 58% in the current quarter, Q1. So
Which is still far away from the 87%. Like, again, I want to put this into context. Like, we're seeing some consolidation, we're seeing some crystallization, but it's not like she's back to zero when, you know, the heyday golden days of
Yeah.
the Duterte numbers of 9 out of 10
Yeah, but
Filipinos.
it's still important to
But it's still
know,
important, of course,
to know
election,
that it's a
yeah.
9 percentage point increase. And when you look at the granular, she did increase her trust ratings in across across areas and across socioeconomic class. So I think those are the two big stories, no? Maybe another minor story may be Speaker Martin Romualdez, who we thought would have a major hit as far as trust is concerned, because his trust ratings are linked also with the president. Had a very nominal
and more yung
drop.
frontal attack sa kanya, even
Yes.
than BBM, di ba? The
Yeah.
whole tambalos-los rhetoric and narrative.
And what's
yeah.
unique about Speaker Romualdez's numbers is that he also had a bump in trust ratings, a positive 7 percentage point increase in Class E, similar to the president.
Right.
So something was happening at that time of the survey, and what Class E is saying is that they continue to trust the president, the vice president, and of course the Speaker of the House. No?
Prof. Ranjit, for the sake of our audience, can we explain again? Class E is around 25% of our voter base,
something
and
like
they're the
that,
most
yeah.
marginalized sector of
Yes,
society.
they're the poorest
Rural
of the poor, yes, yeah.
the poorest of. So just to put people in the
And
context,
then the biggest class would be Class D.
D,
And of
which is
course,
around
there's
55 to
E1,
65%.
E2, there are different levels. No?
Yes.
So that's the overall picture for trust. Now let's talk about performance now.
So what's the difference, by the way, between trust and performance?
No. Trust is tiwala in Filipino. No, that one has to deal with the satisfaction with their work in government. The other deals with an issue of tiwala. Trust,
So one is
no?
competence, one is personal affection, basically, right?
Well, to some extent, you can classify it that way, but it's it's a lot more. How should I say this? When you look at a person who holds position of importance in a particular society, you associate him with two things. One is, does he have good performance, and the legitimacy question has to do with trust also.
Right.
So there are two elements of legitimacy that seems to be common in these survey designs, and trust and performance seem to be the two components that many survey companies try to measure. No? So as a quality, people perceive trust in different ways. It's a personal thing.
Yun nga yung isip ko,
And while we did not define it in our survey, we let people, in a sense, define it for themselves. No? And maybe which to some extent explains changes in, let's say, VP Duterte's trust ratings, and performance ratings, because there's a dissonance between what she actually did and the jump in her trust ratings.
Well,
For
I'll be
example.
more brutal about it. Like, okay, I can see the trust feelings about Sarah, but she doesn't have much of a job since she gave up. You get what I'm saying? So sometimes
So
like
she's been politically irrelevant as far as
actual
cabinet is,
function.
performance is
no
concerned. She
offense
has
again.
no portfolio. Yeah, it's still very hard for us to explain. Based on the numbers that we have, the correlation between, or the relationship between her very high trust ratings, now her jump, that surge in her numbers, given the fact that when you look at it empirically, performance, what she actually did in the first quarter, it's hard to define anything that she did in terms of performance. Now, of course, that's trust. there's also performance, and let's go back. Let's go to performance. If I can turn you to suggest that you go to table 3 point. Yeah, let me just get this out. Yeah, 4 table 4A. So again, same picture. The president takes a 5 percentage point drop in his performance,
which is not catastrophic, right?
It's not catastrophic, but it's there that for us to identify and say that it went down, no? From 64 to 59, and then for VP Duterte, it's the contrast, no? From her lowest performance rating at 48%, she's now at 56%, plus 8 performance percentage point increase. Okay, now that being said, there were across the board declines for the president, across the board improvements in the trust and performance rating of the vice president. The next image is that despite the declines, majority of Filipinos continue to trust and approve of the performance of the president. Including the vice president, and top government officials. That includes the Senate president and the Speaker of the House, no? And I guess that's the image that has been projected by government spokespeople. That yes, declines are there. They recognize the declines. For them, it's nominal, but important to notice. But I think what's important for them now is to emphasize that still the president has. Majority of Filipinos continue to trust and approve of the president. And that, I think that's a big issue with government.
In spite of yung dalawa. Yeah. Ikaw, Cliff, anong basa mo dito? I mean, first of all, kayo ba, how do you separate yung satisfaction, yung trust? Kasi yung trust, naintindihan ko pa kasi personal affective yan eh. Pero yung satisfaction saan? Kasi parang weird na mas mataas yung satisfaction ng isang tao sa performance nung wala siyang trabaho kaysa nung may trabaho siya. Like, medyo, kaya minsan parang siseryosohin ko ba itong mga surveys na to? Minsan hindi ko napapatulan to. So, from a vibe check point of view, Cliff, bakit yung iba parang mas mataas pa ang satisfaction nung walang trabaho kaysa may trabaho?
Well, ako, when you think about it, di ba, parang sa opisina, pwedeng yung hindi nagtatrabaho ng maayos.
The office.
Pwedeng siya pa din yung ine-evaluate ng manager or boss na best because it's all PR, diba?
Vibes. Good
diba?
vibes.
Parang, and just like any other survey, syempre, prone kasi yung surveys as a public opinion research tool, diba? It really relies on what people perceive, diba? Anong nakikita nila, naririnig nila, anong nararamdaman nila.
At that moment,
diba? So, also, if we ask them about the economy, diba? Classic yan case eh. Pag ang surveys, people also cannot reflect properly whether the economy is doing good or doing bad if you ask them. So I think it's the same thing. The perception is that vibes, medyo okay naman pala si VP Sara, diba? Pero yun nga, objectively, if we look back at what happened during the time that the survey was conducted, she was out of the country. Yeah. She's basically an absentee government official, right? Some would argue that as the vice president, she really has no responsibility, right?
Left, yeah.
Oo. Pero even the nominal function of the vice president, which is, for example, yung umikot ka, di ba? And then you respond to mga request ng ating mga kababayan, she wasn't able to do that because she's very busy in The Hague, right? At one point, she was discussing na she's very involved in the recruitment of the lawyer for Digong, di ba? Planning the strategy and all that.
Not getting Harry Roque.
Yeah. Kaya, which is...
You really have to bring that
no,
in.
I'm sure that was a tough choice. Because Harry Roque was the top donor. Like, for you not to choose your top donor.
They must have lost sleep over that.
Who is the only ICC accredited from your camp would be a tough choice. Like, I feel for... Maybe people are satisfied with how she did not choose that.
Yeah, maybe that's part of the reason why
she got ako, ang tanong sa akin, Prof, hindi ko na maintindihan. Bakit si Harry Roque lumitaw tapos sarili niyang pang inaasikaso niya, asylum niya? So, for me, I think I would, if I were DDS, I would be satisfied with
really
Sarah.
Enjoying this, though.
Taking care of her father's welfare.
Pwede din. And when you
I'm
think...
just trying to make sense. Ano satisfaction
Maybe
saan?
it's hard to make sense. Honestly, it's
maybe
hard.
Maybe it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, honestly. And maybe this is something that there should be another probe that looks into do our regular everyday Filipinos understand the role of the vice president, the role of the president? I think for the
Mahalaga yan,
president,
yeah.
I think it's clear because you see it in there's a relationship between our probe on urgent national concerns. What's the first number one
right.
in Okta? Number one, close to what? A little over 50% is really inflation.
Correct.
Number two is jobs, no? Getting quality jobs. And third is affordable food. So it's very,
Yeah.
for a country that sees the president as the solution provider of everything. And I mean, it's easy to understand
Commander-in-Chief,
his job,
yeah.
and say, we're not satisfied.
Is this a binary issue whereby, kumbaga, medyo hindi ako satisfied kay BBM, one way of signaling that is I'll just give it to the other side. And last time I checked,
it's hard to do that because in the survey they don't really they don't do a comparison with the president. They do an assessment based on the person, Kasi
No, I know, but maybe heuristically,
Yeah, heuristically,
my way of expressing dissatisfaction with BBM is to look at the next alternative,
It's possible,
who happens to be number 2 and who happens to be enemy of the president. Right? Again, it maybe doesn't make sense, but the way it could make sense to me is that way. Na mabuti siyang anak, andun siya for the former president, making
It's
sure his
possible.
welfare is taken care of. Kasi functionally, I'm not sure satisfaction with what.
Yeah,
Right? What is she doing as a vice
It's
president?
very clear there was nothing achieved there during that short period of time. But there's also one way to understand it. Maybe Cleve can also talk about this. Is the intervening events. March was a very big
month, yeah.
disrupt as far as perceptions were concerned. The former president, an elderly man, being taken out, being brought to the Hague, all the disruption that it
Right.
created, and maybe some of this is partly explained by that, a sympathy, and trust. Well, as what we're observing is the higher the trust ratings are, it sometimes pulls up performance, for some reason or the other. So there must be some relationship. But here, it's very hard to point out why her numbers are so high.
But even on a volume issue Halimbawa, if we just count yung parang nominal counting lang, gaano kadaming beses ko narinig si VP Sara, gaano kadaming beses ko nakita na may statement siya, gaano kadaming beses siya na-cover ng media.
Is this an exposure saturation
yeah,
effect?
I think
It's
I would
possible,
say na
it's possible, yeah.
mataas yung volume than
Yeah.
the president
Yes.
himself, right? Even,
Yeah.
I mean, kung
That's
babalikan,
another way, yeah.
kung babalikan pa natin, di ba? Remember how Malacanang also handled the address, the night that was the Duterte was flown,
Yeah.
'di ba? Parang medyo hindi din masyadong strong yung statement ng presidente. And medyo nasarahan na yun ng ganun, 'di ba? And then you have VP Sara, it's like a campaign for her, right? She's campaigning illegal 'yan, ganito 'yan. So my point being that the Filipino people, they've heard the side of the Dutertes, right? So every day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Pero medyo tingin ko, hindi natin naririnig yung ano pa yung kabilang side.
I mean, we'll talk about the Senate race. My sense is Bato is in the news also every day because everyone's saying, mahuhuli pa siya. It looks like it's helping him also in the Senate
Think about
race.
this.
Yeah.
Do you hear Vince Dizon more than the president?
Yes, ako, oo.
Because
Vince Dizon is just the secretary, not just, but he's the secretary.
But he's a very
of the-
PR savvy
Yeah, but
guy, I would say.
the
Yeah.
PR.
Hi po, Secretary Vince.
The PR of that guy should be the model for the president.
He worked for Ronald at some point, right? If I'm not mistaken, right?
Ronald is with him. But anyway, the thing is, think about it. The administration has lost the narrative now, the battle of narratives, and maybe
Or abandon the field because they had the upper ground with
Yeah.
the upper hand with that thing, and it's suddenly okay, we're done. Let's nothing to
Let's
see
celebrate,
here. We're moving on. That was,
oh.
and then immediately the next side came and just took over the whole
Yes,
land, right?
yeah.
That's how I see the information.
And it's
landscape.
easy for her to attack the president because there, aside from the fact that this is a perceptions battle,
Right.
it's driven by both information and misinformation. There are real grievances from the people because you look at the Okta and maybe WR survey on self-rated
Poverty.
hunger and poverty. It really went up in the fourth quarter. Number two, the real problems, the urgent national concerns that have been there for the last 6 quarters have been consistent after COVID. It's inflation, which, by the way, the government has very little power really to contain, except for food inflation, which is still number 3, and then the jobs, quality jobs. So people have a legitimate grievance.
Right.
There is a coherent, I don't know if coherent is the word, no? At least active,
Consistently
alternative
active,
critiquing. And so the perceptions may have been shaped by that, no? But of course, we have to also understand that a lot of what's being spewed by the opposition is also needs to be, we need to be
Fact
critical
check.
about, kasi
Fact
fact
check,
check
yeah,
talaga.
yeah.
No? And may have created this perception that not only is she trusted, that she's actually doing her job by critiquing, no? I mean, the only way for the government to counter that is to face this, to accept that there's a decline and a continuing decline for almost 2 quarters now, and to say that we need to focus on getting the job done because people are asking for results. It's already the midterm, di ba?
Right.
And while yes, this survey says that majority of Filipinos continue to trust and approve of the president, but they're saying, you have to do better. And again, food inflation is a big issue here. The president promised cheap access to cheap price. I know it takes time to
Oh, well,
roll
I
out
mean,
all
it's
of this.
3 years.
Yeah, I know. It's taken 3 years. So, but
Right.
once he focuses his eye, or the cabinet focuses its eye on the ball and gets all of these programs implemented, maybe we'll see a shift, no, a reversal.
If you look at the numbers, like, what does it say? For instance, the gains in the E tell me na baka yung subsidized rice program nila,
Yeah.
baka pwede it could turn things around
Yes.
for the best. And
Yeah.
in principle, I'm okay with that because kailangan ng mga kaubayan natin dahil yung self-rate hunger. And then geographically, what does your survey say? Dapat ba kasi there's just so much you can subsidize, right?
Yeah.
Billion per month yan ang gagastusin
Yeah.
mo yan. So, malamang hindi mo pwede gawin sa buong bansa yan. Again, of course, you want this to happen for everyone, pero given the limited resources of the government at hindi ka pwede mag-subsidize, like, strategically, what makes sense for the government based on your numbers?
Yeah, I think they're focusing really on certain places in Mindanao, Barm in particular. They're also targeting Visayas, and you'll see that trust ratings have slightly improved there. Still negative for the president. And they're focusing on programs that target, Class
The most
E.
marginalized,
And which explains why, in the case of the president, despite all his decline in all the areas and all the socioeconomic, in Class E, in this particular quarter, he has had very good, positive numbers. The increase is plus 8 percentage points. And it's the same, almost the same with trust. So, he's doing well with regards to certain initiatives in E, but he has to do better on the whole for a lot of things. So.
Clive, I want to go back to you kasi ang inisip ko dito is, if you're BBM, you just have to accept na realistically, there's a certain demographic you have lost forever. If anything, kalaban mo na yan. That's basically supporters ng former president, right? No matter what you do or not do and say, wala na yung mga yan. So basic ang labanan dito is, beyond your own base, let's just call them the loyalists, ano mga pwede mong mapanalo, di ba? That's basically the zone of operation or negotiation he can do. Where do you think he's doing fine or not doing as bad as we thought, considering everything? And where do you think he really should improve? Again, based on your own surveys and also the other surveys you're looking at.
Yeah,
I'm just making the coordinates of possibility clear here because I think people, you're not gonna get the 80-70% anymore.
Yeah,
Tapos na yan.
that's
That
the
phase is
honeymoon,
over.
that's
over. Yeah.
And you're right. No, I think the first lesson is that if you look at the survey, so for example in WR Numero, the decline has been consistent for both the two leaders. And the decline started during the time na nag-break ang unity,
right,
diba?
right.
So parang the way that I make sense of it is that yung parents mo nag-break and now you're forced to choose sides, right? And there's no such thing as going back to that harmonious relationship
Wala
na
na yan.
mapapanalo
That's
mo
over,
ulit. 87, 90%, no? Hindi na. And what we're seeing is that in the survey numbers, naturally, may mga baluarte sila, di ba? So,
Exactly.
and BBM's baluarte is Luzon, if not the north of Luzon, and
Yeah,
Sara's is Mindanao. Kaya the story of mga performance satisfaction ratings actually is a very regional story. Yan, mahalagang tignan dyan eh. Halimbawa, yung uptick, yung pick up sa numbers ni Sara, that's primarily driven by also yung baluarte niya na Mindanao. And then
Right.
you also see that in the case of Bongbong. So the battleground then is actually
Right.
other areas, and that involves halimbawa ang laki Metro Manila. And ito, kaya babalik tayo doon sa...
Yung ba yung swing state natin, kumbaga?
Kaya babalik tayo doon sa story because,
Yeah.
for example, Metro Manila is an air war-heavy population.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
So,
halimbawa,
tactics
yung,
naman yan. Yeah,
yung sa ICC arrest, may notion tayo sa communication, especially in the digital na hindi na traditional eh. So parang, what is the first explanation to get to the people? Sticks. Tapos, lugi ka na kapag naunahan ka kasi you have to undo all of the narratives. And I think in my observation, the Duterte camp, labas agad sila, nag-stick, tapos kailangan mo ngayong i-undo na, ay, teka, hindi naman totoo yung violation niya ng sovereignty, hindi totoo na violate yung rights ni Digong, no, and all of that, right? But if you're coming from a very traditional perspective ng communication na lalo na medyo sakit ng mga napupunta sa Malacanang niya, not just President Marcos but even previous occupants of office of the president, gusto nilang daanin sa old ways of communication, but it changed eh. And then of course Visayas, no, is also now a battleground,
Swing
no?
state.
Lalo pa syempre VP Sara, for example, has this connection with mga Bisaya, 'di ba? And then si President Marcos naman, especially also with his relationship with the Speaker of the House, Martin Romualdez, they also have some
Their
segments
Visaya
of
connection.
Visayas. Pero meron ding opposition yung Visayas, 'di ba? Kakamping, kalimbawa.
We should discuss in the second part.
Diba?
Yeah,
Parang,
we'll go to
so,
Lenny later on.
Who do they go to now? And that's very important kung saan sila madadala kasi mat lang yun eh, 'di ba? Parang yun yung mag-end up of how you're going to improve. And the last thing I want to say is that related to the rice, for example, the good thing is that yung pinakagutom nating mga kababayan, 'di ba? Na nangangailangan ng ganong klaseng programa, medyo dun din ata yung strategically from a political perspective to also for the Malacanang to invest naman
Yun
eh.
nga, yeah.
So parang
Target audience,
parang nagma-match naman eh, 'di ba? If we're talking about the poorest provinces, 'di ba?
They're targeting it,
Yun din naman eh, yung nangangailangan. So baka this might work well naman.
Last but not least, before we transition to the Senate race and the alignments, including Lenny, we want to talk about Lenny and Amy and some of the key figures. Is this also a problem of hindi lang consistent, spontaneous, right? Like dire-diretso, and you have a president who seems to be, as we speak, the Malacanang is even changing the terms of engagement with the media. May new rules na sila. Like they're doing still a comms overhaul while the other side is sticking to the time-tested
lean and mean and focused.
Lean and mean and go.
And to some extent for our kababayans, very coherent.
Right.
Because see, here's the thing I agree with Cleve that at some level, this is a perceptions game, a narratives game. But if I was there to advise the president, the focus is to really do what you have to do to get poverty down, to get hunger down. Diba? That's the first thing. You have to really govern, and governance will be the key.
But you have to explain it to the people, right? You have fireside chat. Explain it to them.
And then he has to ask Vince Dizon to go with him. To find out.
Is that his saving grace now?
The comms people the new comms people are really very competent people.
Claire Castro is doing very well.
She needs a framing, but she's good. She's hard hitting. But really, he has to do what Vince Dizon is doing. Go around the country, focus on core issues, and then talk about how specific governance interventions can be made. There's a lot of things the government is doing, but it's not, you're right, it's not communicating it in a way that's effective, in a way that looks like Vince Dizon, who, by the way, has not done anything yet so far. He's
going for the low-hanging fruits. High impact,
in fairness to him, he's really focusing on the low-hanging fruits, and maybe the president has to do the same thing. There's a perception that things are getting done, and you have this confidence when you look at Vince Dizon. When you look at Vince Dizon, he looks like he's going to run for the Senate. He's not running the DOT. So,
isama na ba natin sa natin? List
natin
ng
list natin possible.
2028.
Pero ang point ko, the president really has to go out and the comms people have to
tell the story.
Tell the story.
Yeah.
There's no story right now. It's defending themselves against a narrative that is driven largely by misinformation rin diba? So I think that has to be the focus also. That while you get the job done, you have to communicate
Tell a story.
that you're getting the job done, because people will change their perception. This is just now, but of course, these results are a part of a broader effect of a broader context. It's embedded in a context, diba? And that context was March, the incarceration of the former president. And maybe there is a sympathy surge, no? There are questions, no? And that has affected people's perception. But in the long run, the only way to move this to a positive trajectory, to reverse this, is really to get the job done, to do what they set out to do, to govern, di ba? Last point, this is very important. Despite all the declines,
Still majority.
Still majority trust, still majority approve of the performance of the president. And I guess for them, that's still some saving grace, di ba?
Well, saving grace, he's going to his legacy years, so he has to have a story to tell for his final years in office. So that's very important. I think all the signal here is that hindi tapos ang laban. There's still a lot to do, but you have to up your game, basically, and maybe learn from your own new hires in the cabinet. On that note, thank you very much for joining us for this latest episode of FYI, a voter education series. Dun sa next episode, last na ito for today, pag-usapan natin, alignments, realignments, Lenny Pacquiao, Amy versus the brother. Like, marami tayong pag-usapan. And for me, actually, I think even more bardagulan na discussion na yan. So, for more voter education and for more agitation, watch out for next episode. Thank you very much.